It's about 9:31, and we have at least 38 people on board with us this morning for our second legislative update. I would ask everyone just to start out, if you would please mute your audio so that we don't have any background noises going on while we're trying to conduct the legislative update. My name is Sonia Learcamp. I also go by Sunny, which is my nickname. And I am a member and co-vice president of the Brown County League of Women Voters. And perhaps some of you have seen me before because I also chaired the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Committee. And if you had an opportunity to participate in any of those forums, you might have seen me there. So I'm so happy to be moderating for this legislative update today. I want to first of all thank our sponsors, the League of Women Voters for Bloomington and Monroe County, the League of Women Voters for Brown County, the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce, and the Brown County Chamber of Commerce. We also want to greet our legislators who are able to be present this morning, and we are most appreciative of that. We have Representative Matt Pierce. Matt, thank you for being here, and Senator Shelley Yoder. Shelley, also thank you to you for being here this morning. So we will go ahead now and discuss a little bit about the process we're going to use for asking questions. And then we'll start after that. If I could have the next slide, please, Lori. Okay, first of all, we will ask the legislators to introduce themselves individually. And they'll have about 10 minutes each to do that. And give us maybe some highlights of things that they see going on in the legislature. And then after they introduce themselves, then we will ask the participants here, anyone who is watching this forum, to ask their questions. And what we would like for you to do is to limit yourself initially to one question. If you have additional questions, hold those in reserve in case there's time later, but we want to give everyone an opportunity to ask their questions if possible. If you would put your question in the chat box and address it to the question moderator, we would appreciate that. Questions will be taken in order received. So you can start entering your questions at any point in time, and then we will call upon you in the order the questions are received. And at the time you are called upon, we will also ask you to unmute your microphone so that you can speak your question directly to the representative and senator. Now, I want you to make sure and be aware of the fact that Community Access Television is recording this session. And each question that you will be asking, you will be limited to a 1-minute time period. The timer will sound at 10 seconds. Posing a question constitutes your permission to be recorded by Community Access Television. All legislators will be given the opportunity to answer each question. And remember, please, this is an informative session, not a debate, and we would like everyone to please be civil and respectful. So those are kind of the ground rules. If anybody has any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll assume that everyone understands and we can move on forward. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. And the rules for the legislators are that you may take up to 2 minutes to answer a question. A timer will sound when you have 10 seconds left. The order of who answers will rotate. So we can stop screen sharing now, and we will start with the legislators' opening remarks, and we will start with Senator Yoder.
Thank you so much, and good morning. I come to you actually from Louisville, Kentucky. I am down here for a volleyball tournament, and it was supposed to be last weekend and was moved to this weekend due to the weather last weekend. So I'm so thankful that we have an opportunity to log on and still be together for this important event. And I want to say thank you, because there were several things that came up in our last League of Women Voters legislative update that I was able to work with the participants on that call, and we were able to follow up on some bills and make some changes. And I really appreciate the engagement that all of you who are on this call have made, and the commitment that you've made to be on the call. So thank you. For me, in this session, I sent out a pre-legislative survey and gathered some information from you, and based on that, made some decisions on some legislation that I would file as well as support. And those had to do with the environment, childcare, affordable housing, and healthcare. So I wanted to give you an update on those fronts, because I heard loud and clear from you that those issues are really important to you right now. And so with the environment, we've done a great deal thus far on wastewater and addressing how our state's going to manage our wastewater concerns. So we've done a lot of work there. One of the interesting bills that we're currently discussing, and I really want to hear from Representative Pierce on this, is a electric vehicle infrastructure bill. And I just heard that in committee last week, and it was a good bill, although there was an amendment added, and I'm not happy about the amendment. So give you a heads up, Matt, as it makes its way back to the House after it gets out of the Senate, but it really it gives more power to the utility company. It's got the footprint where a private entity, let's say a convenience store, they want to add an electric vehicle charger. Whatever footprint that facility is in, they would have to use and log in, be a part of the grid to get that electricity. That private entity could not put up, say, a solar array and get their electricity from that renewable source. So that is not a great amendment. I'd love to hear from Representative Pierce on that. Childcare. I was part of a childcare study that did pass the Senate, and it's now over in the House side. And I saw on the agenda for this coming week that we will be seeing some childcare bills coming over from the House. So we are actively trying to address childcare accessibility in Indiana. Affordable housing, right now over in the Senate, I was part of, authored a couple of bills that are now over in the House. One is the enforcement of habitability standards for renters, and another is an eligibility changing for senior citizens, the senior property tax deduction. I heard from you over the summer, several constituents had reached out about that. And so we worked in the Senate, and that bill passed, and it's now over in the House. It hasn't been put on in the committee for a hearing yet, but those are SB 230 for inhabitability standards and SB 236 to address the senior property tax deduction and increasing that for our seniors. And then finally, for healthcare, some exciting things there. Last session, we did succeed in expanding Medicaid services for our for maternal Hoosiers, maternal health, not maternal Hoosiers, but for maternal health. And we had some things that we had to finish up this session, and that has pass through the Senate. It's going to be voted on the full Senate, but it increases Medicaid services for maternal health from 60 days to 12 months. That is so important, and it's a huge win for Indiana. So hopefully that will get through the Senate and get back to the House and actually happen for Hoosiers. And the other thing that I think is a really positive is we expanded Medicaid reimbursement for school nurses. Right now, school nurses do provide care, but schools weren't able to be reimbursed for that care. So now, hopefully, we're going to get that done. We tried to get it done last session, but it's back and hopefully gaining some momentum and support. So that's all I'll have. That's all I'll say now. I'll hand it back over to Representative Pierce. I want to say thank you, and I'm glad you're here. And I appreciate all of the calls and emails and postcards that I've received from you.
Thank you, Senator Yoder. Representative Pierce.
Thank you, everyone, for attending this morning. Why don't I pick up on Shelley's report on the electric vehicle bill. It's disappointing to hear that amendment went in. The Indiana Energy Association, which represents all of the energy companies, they very much want a provision in the bill that essentially says that anybody who's selling electricity to charge electric vehicles, basically putting in these EV charging stations, that they must buy their power from the incumbent local utility. And this amendment was proposed in the House committee. And I essentially said, you know, hey, Republicans, don't we want some entrepreneurship here? Don't we want to leave some space for people to innovate and do things differently? Or do we just want to lock in the utility monopoly? And much to my surprise, the chairman of the committee said, okay, we'll think about that. And the amendment never came back, perhaps because he knew they could just do it in the Senate. So, you know, what that essentially means, as Senator Yoder pointed out, is it really shuts down an opportunity to do other forms of energy and to look for the cheapest energy. It's essentially ensuring that the utilities are the wholesalers for any electric vehicle charging. And it would keep you from being able to put in a bunch of solar panels behind your charging station or to go out on the open market and buy power from clean energy sources. And it's just, you know, too restrictive in my opinion. So it will be interesting to see whether or not when that bill comes back from the House or from the Senate, the House can either just concur, basically agree with the change and vote the bill through to go to the governor, or can object and insist on going to a conference committee. And I've heard that the Utilities Energy Association have really been pushing that hard because they are trying to figure out a way in which they can become kind of the dominant provider of electric vehicle charging, because they know that their business model is under siege. You know, right now they're a regulated monopoly with a guaranteed profit, and, you know, people have to buy their energy. But as more people put solar on the roofs, find alternative ways, get more energy efficient, have storage through batteries, they can really reduce the amount of electricity they buy from the utilities. And so they're kind of looking for how to diversify a little bit. So we'll have to see how that kind of works out. Kind of while we're on the subject of energy, two bills that I think will be interesting to see what happens in the House is a bill that would create incentives to push forward small modular nuclear reactors to provide energy, which has been touted to us in the General Assembly for at least 10 years. This is great new technology, that it's safer, that it's smaller scale. And it's very alluring because obviously it would be zero carbon generation. The problem is there are two things I think that are getting ignored about this. Is just that the technology's really not been tested anywhere. I think maybe out in Idaho, there's a first project that's actually going to get funded to see, you know, can they build it on budget, on time, and what will it actually cost to operate it. And then the other issue that never gets discussed by the nuclear power industry is what do you do with the spent fuel? You know, we still have this issue of radioactive material, which needs to be stored for, you know, thousands of years. And that's a difficult issue. So I'm not very excited about the idea of, because what the bill would essentially say is like, okay, utilities, come on down, try a small nuclear reactor, and we will give you incentives, early payback on your investment, and do things to, you know, make it financially good for you to do this. And that means the ratepayers are going to be paying for that if it becomes a debacle. So I think we should slow down on that and wait and see if this technology is actually proven not only to be, technologically feasible, but actually financially feasible. That's the most important thing to me. Another thing that's interesting is there are a number of counties in, I guess you would call it East Central Indiana, where their counties have essentially blocked any wind turbines, and I think now they're extending it to solar in their counties because people are very hostile to those forms of energy being put into their counties, and that's really blocked out the ability to expand these kind of large-scale renewable resources. So last year there was an attempt to create a state bill that would put some parameters and requirements to allow some of these facilities into these counties, and that kind of imploded over in the Senate at the last minute. And so now there's another approach to it where there's a bill moving that would essentially say to the counties, if you declare yourself kind of renewable energy ready and you open yourself up to allowing deployment of these energy facilities, then we will basically give you $1 for every megawatt hour of energy that's created there into your tax base. So I think basically last year was a little bit maybe more of a stick approach. So now this year they're trying the carrot approach, and we'll just have to see whether that gets through. That is a bit of an issue. We've got a lot of areas of the state now that have essentially become off limits to renewable energy. And I'll just finish up with two bills of interest to Monroe County specifically. Senate Bill 390 is a bill that deals with all the food and beverage taxes around the state. It's essentially trying to phase out all the existing taxes and then create one generic tax that you could ask for just a certain list of items. And in the process of doing that, all of the existing taxes are sunsetted. So for Monroe County, it would say that our tax would have to end in 20 years or whenever bonds are paid off. That whatever bonds are outstanding now are paid off. So that's obviously a problem for Monroe County because, we were having the great debate about how exactly to expand the center and how to do it and all of that. Then COVID came along and it's like, okay, it makes sense to pause on that and kind of see how things settle out. And so I've been hearing from people that 20 years is really not going to be enough to do that project. They decide to move ahead with it. And so I've already been talking to people in the Ways and Means area. I don't know if that bill's going to move in the House. I'm trying to get prepared if it does, because I think that our local officials should be given the chance to make the decision on that. If they decide that it's just not feasible or doesn't make sense to do that expansion project, they can make that decision. But I'd rather have that done down here at the local level than have some artificial limits put in by the state, basically limiting it. And then another piece of legislation of interest, Senator Yoder's Senate Concurrent Resolution 13 was heard in the House Transportation Committee and now will be voted on probably on Monday on the full House floor. And that would name a bridge over I-69 in honor of Reserve Sheriff Deputy James Driver, who you might recall was killed when he was responding to a vehicle accident, ended up in a vehicle accident himself. And that was a very sad situation. We've lost at least two now that I know of law enforcement officers responding or helping out during accidents. So we just wanted to remember his sacrifice. And so I'm pleased that that's moving along, and I anticipate that will pass the House. And at some point in the future, there'll probably be a ceremony to officially rename a bridge over there in honor of James Driver. And that's my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Representative Pierce. Okay, I guess it's time for us to open the floor to questions. And I would ask our question moderator if we have anyone in the queue so far.
Am I unmuted? Yes, hello. Our first question is from Jim Borman, and our second question will be from Daryl, forgive me if I mispronounce it, Bogus. So Jim, please go ahead and unmute.
Okay, good morning. House Bill 1134 is in the Senate Education Committee with the Indiana Content standards, teachers are required to teach the final solution. If one of the main sources in the class was the graphic novel by Bloomington's Joe Lee about the book Forgiveness, Story of Ava Kor, survivor of the Auschwitz twin experiments, could a child opt out of the class alleging that he was uncomfortable with the content because of his background? How could this be workable in the day-to-day experience in a classroom in Indiana? How would a teacher provide individual lessons for unlimited number of students who felt uncomfortable with topics presented under a year's worth of lessons? Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. We'll give that question first to Representative Pierce.
Yeah, that House Bill 1134 is kind of a crazy bill, in my opinion, and I voted against it. A similar bill, as you might know, was moving in the Senate, and then the proponent of the bill said in a committee hearing that if you were teaching about World War II and Nazis, you would have to make sure you were neutral and gave both sides of the issue, and that got some international coverage. So the Senate wisely said, well, we're just going to kill that bill because it's like totally tainted with this ridiculous idea that every issue has two equal sides, as opposed to teaching students the moral right and wrong and the historical injustices that occurred. So that was good that the Senate gave up. So they've got the House bill now, and we're hoping they'll just give up on the whole topic. But I don't know if they'll attempt to move that along. But it's just, it lets students opt out of anything that they don't like or might offend them. And then how's that going to impact into when they're assessed on what they did in that course? And it's going to hamstring teachers, and it's going to enable, I think a really big chilling effect, as the First Amendment lawyers say. Essentially, teachers are going to be so concerned or nervous about whether they're going to get somehow attacked or ruled to have done something wrong if they discuss anything remotely controversial in the classroom. And our students are not going to be well served by that. So I'm hoping that bill will just go by the wayside, just like the Senate bill did.
Thank you, Representative Pierce. Senator Yoder.
Yes, I wanted just to answer the question. Yes, it's absolutely possible that if Jolie's graphic novel would be causing discomfort for a student, and therefore the parent could say, I don't want my student reading that. We've seen this happen with Mouse in states that has already been banned. And I'll just speak to that. That specific graphic novel was really formational for me. And I can't imagine beginning to give students outs for any book and the amount of time and care. But we already have this. This already happens locally in a school. If a student is uncomfortable, they can go to their parents, and the parent can speak to the teacher, and the teacher can make accommodations. We heard for SB 167 that we were successful in killing that bill. When that bill was heard in the Education Committee, we were able to ask, if you had a problem, was your situation resolved locally? And absolutely 100% every single time, yes. So 1134 is just as dangerous and concerning. I am so glad there has been the activism and the reaction throughout Indiana at the State House. So thank you for that. Keep it up. It has not been, I haven't received the notice that we will be meeting in the Education Committee this next week. But as we know, that chairman does wait till the last minute and then makes changes at the last minute, and even did so last week with an anti-trans bill. He said there will be no recording. There will be we were only allowed one question. He had told us before the committee had started that he wasn't going to let us ask any questions, the senators, until the very end. And we pushed back. And so he said, okay, I'll let you ask one question. But he broke the open door law when he said there will be no recording of this meeting. And this did get some attention. We need to continue to apply that pressure. I appreciate everyone's notes and concern about some of these bills, but 1134 is one that I am hearing. They're trying to fix it, but it isn't fixable. At some point, they just have to recognize that they went too far, they stepped in it, and they just need to kill that bill as well. Thank you for the question.
Shelley, can you remind us who that chairman is, just in case we want to write an email or something like that?
Chairman Jeff Rotz, and it's RAATZ.
Thank you very much. Okay. Ms. Moderator, do we have
Our next question, thank you, Sunny, sorry to cut you off. Our next question would be from Daryl Bogus, and after that would be Amy Oliver. So Daryl, please unmute.
Thank you. I have a question about the 2017 legislature passed a bill restricting solar energy. It was opposed by many groups except the utility companies. It passed by a very close vote. It was presented as being the beginning of a conversation on energy policy. That conversation has not been allowed to happen for the last 5 years, while Indiana solar owners have increased to more than 1%. That's where we are right now, 1%. Under what circumstances can a future solar bill receive a committee hearing and proceed to floor debate in the legislature when the committee chair will not allow a hearing?
Thank you very much, Daryl, for your question. Senator Yoder, would you go first to answer this one, please?
Thank you, Daryl. I don't know. I feel like I need to just be quiet on this one and hear maybe there are those folks on this call that can give us some tips, because as you know, I've tried. I have filed a net metering, repealing that the last 2 sessions. I mean, this is only my 2nd session, but you know, what's frustrating is I have had a hard time even having a conversation about addressing this. And at this point, you know, getting a hearing is actually maybe step, 4 or 5. I just want step 1. Can I just get a meeting where we can talk about this? I do want you to know that I am taking every opportunity, whether it's a coffee or a lunch, and I'm bringing this up to try to gain some traction so we can have this conversation in a committee. And hopefully, I'm not giving up yet. I would, we haven't heard this bill, but I think it's one of very few, but I would love people's thoughts on House Bill 1196. It's in the Senate now, so it's come over to us. We haven't heard it yet, but it's a Homeowners Association and solar bill. I had heard some concern about that bill, that maybe it wasn't all that we had hoped it would be, but I did notice that it did pass unanimously, and sometimes that is, it tells me that there are good things there, but maybe it's not perfect. But I would love to hear how we can even make it better, and maybe that's a place where we can amend into 1196 that is more favorable to net metering.
Thank you, Senator Yoder. Representative Pierce.
Yeah, Daryl, I'm just as frustrated as you are about this. Essentially in 2017, the utilities convinced the legislature, and it was a pretty hard fought battle, and it was a very close vote, but they basically convinced the legislature to reduce the net metering that used to get a credit at the retail rate for the extra power you fed into the grid. And that's now been, driven way down to like a wholesale rate. And it's not, I don't think it really reflects the true value that solar brings to the grid and to other customers. So we have an energy task force that's working, and I keep getting told that next year is the year. So we'll have to see what actually happens. One of the things that was concerning was the Utility Commission, at the behest of one of the utilities, essentially changed the way that you calculate what is the actual extra amount of power that you would be compensated for as a rooftop solar owner. And that so-called inflow-outflow calculation was clearly against the statute that had been written. But we had said all along during that battle that the battle's over what you should be paid. The battle's not over how you calculate what the extra amount is that you should be paid for. But the Utility Commission just went off and did something completely different. Well, the Court of Appeals just ruled that that is the case and that what the Utility Commission did is not consistent with the statute. And so I've now heard rumblings that maybe the utilities will try before the end of the session to overturn that Court of Appeals ruling and get the definition changed in statute so they can continue to have an even lower payment requirement, which would essentially make it so that solar power never pays itself back. I mean, they're essentially just trying to really keep people tethered to their own utilities, and they don't want anyone to be energy independent in this state.
Thank you, Representative Pierce. Our next question.
Our next question will be Amy Oliver. Amy, please unmute.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Great, thank you. I am a former teacher and a current school board member in Brown County. I'm very concerned about House Bill 1134. And one of the things I'm most concerned about last year and this year is it feels like the legislature is not listening to the thousands of educational professionals who are advising legislators that this bill is ill-conceived and harmful to teachers and students in our communities. My question is, I guess two questions. How can we as educational professionals have our voices heard by those who are advancing this bill and similar initiatives? I am meeting with my senator on Tuesday, and we are all writing letters, but we feel like we're not being heard. And then I guess my second question, based on what you said earlier, is, what do you think the future of this bill is in the Senate? Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And Representative Pierce, if you would go first, please.
Yeah, just as far as, what might happen in the Senate with that bill, I think it's still up in the air. I think there's some hope, the fact that the Senate killed off its own version of the same bill. But, they might think that somehow they can adjust it and make it more palatable or defensible and get it passed through. So I think we just have to wait and see on that. As far as how to get people to actually listen to the educators or actually, know what's going on, that's hard and it's frustrating. And quite honestly, I think at this point, the only answer has to be at the ballot box. And that's frustrating because we've had this gerrymandering now, which has created an unfair playing field when it comes to our elections. But I think that unless these legislators begin to feel some kind of accountability at the ballot box, they're just going to keep going their own route. I mean, essentially right now, at least in the House, these legislators are most concerned about the Republican primaries where they're facing challengers who are more extreme than they are, who are complaining that they're not going far enough. And so they're getting pushed completely to the extreme right by these primaries because now the general election in many cases is just a formality. But there are some districts out there, including one in our own backyard, which is going to be an open seat, which is highly competitive. So there are some places where you can get involved in the political process. And I just think that is the only way we're really going to get any movement on that, because that is the most frustrating thing is the educators are being completely disrespected. They're not being listened to. And it's because they fear the extreme right more than they fear the educators who are just so frustrated and angry about this situation where they're not trusted, to be the professionals.
Thank you. Senator Yoder.
Amy, I want to tell you, yes, it feels like they're not listening, but they are. And they're not taking meetings with you because they are intimidated by the teachers and the activism and your voices, and keep it up. It feels like they're not listening because that is their strategy. The strategy is to make it feel like you don't matter, but you're intimidating them. So if they ignore you, then maybe you will become disheartened and go away. But do not be disheartened because of the work you're doing, because of your pushback, because of all of your grassroots organization is how we've been able to draw attention to these really dangerous and not good bills. So I would say, yes, I can understand. They don't take your meetings, they don't return emails, and it feels like they're not listening. And I want to say it's because it's working, because they're intimidated by you. And when you walk through those doors and you see all the red, all the teachers and your organization, I think it's put them back on their heels. And when you are able to do that, they may not show you that they're listening, but they are, and they're trying to intimidate you. They're trying to silence our teachers, our public education administrators, teachers, families. So keep it up. And I just want to let you know, do not be disheartened because it is working, and keep it up.
Thank you, Senator Yoder. We often need those reminders when we're in the trenches. So moderator, do we have the next question ready?
Yes, Russ Skiba, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Please unmute and ask your question.
Thanks very much. Yes, you got it right. It's Skiba. Thanks to the league, and thank you both, Senator Yoder and Representative Pierce, for being on today. This is great. I do want to say, in response to Amy Oliver's question, that just to reinforce what you just said, I really appreciate it, Senator Yoder. There is a huge coalition. It's not just the teachers, but NAACP, the Urban League, those who are supporting social emotional learning, the ISTA, as you know, have all.
You have 24 seconds left, Russ, to ask your question.
Okay, I'm sorry, Sonia. This is really important, so I'm going to continue if you don't mind. Okay. They're all working together. My question is to Senator Yoder, especially. What do you see as the Democrats' response on this? How strongly do you feel they're pushing back? And we're so lucky to have you on the Education Committee in the Senate. And I'm wondering, particularly, what do you see the Democrats on that committee doing to? I know there are very few of you, and it's tough. But do you all have a strategy to push back on this bill and really make this public so that everyone really can see what's going on with this bill?
Okay, thank you, Russ. And Senator Yoder, if you would answer first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Russ. We just the Democrats who serve on the Education Committee, we meet regularly. We always have a pre-meeting meeting and strategize. We are anticipating the silence around 1134 does concern me, because all I'm hearing is from people like you when you are able to talk with the author of, or the sponsor of that bill on the Senate side, which is Senator Rogers, who is working on this bill. I'm only hearing it secondhand, because I've not been able to hear it from her if we're actually going to hear this bill. So I'm checking my phone every single, hourly to see if the Education Committee, when it's been scheduled to meet, if it's on the agenda, and then we'll have to, we're already anticipating that and getting our strategy in order so we can be ready. But yes, and up until now, our strategy, honestly, it's just asking a lot of questions, because it's in their answering, it's hearing from testimony, it's letting people know what is actually happening at the State House and getting people there to share their testimony. That's our strategy. You are our strategy. But we do meet and we talk about how we're going to make sure that what needs to come to light comes to light. So it's a very active process, and I appreciate that question.
Thank you.
Representative Pierce.
Yeah, there are all kinds of different strategies you can try to take, but I think in committee hearings, the most important thing is to be, asking questions, particularly of the proponents of the bill, which points out, all the negative consequences and all the uncertainty and just how they haven't really, thought that bill through very clearly. But, as Senator Yoder pointed out, it's really hard to beat a packed room with a lot of people really basically driving home the message that we don't like this bill. This bill's got problems, and this is not going to be a good thing. And, it's interesting because in the House, we Democrats have become a bit frustrated because we've noticed that the Republicans seem to be adopting, the old Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope approach, where you will challenge them on something and they just don't respond. I mean, you can really make some pretty scurrilous allegations about their bill and they won't feel any need to defend themselves. And I think that they have determined that, the less kind of friction, less controversy, less heat and light, then that's less for the media to report on or to get interested in, and things can maybe go through under the radar. So we've noticed that a lot on the House floor. It's very interesting how you want to get a robust debate going to really air out the issues and kind of show how maybe people haven't thought things through the way they should. And yet the other side just really doesn't participate. They kind of sit on their hands, and that makes it much more difficult. But I think in committee, the public showing up and expressing themselves can have an impact. And then I think the members of the committee asking some hard questions to the proponents is also helpful.
Thank you, Representative Pierce. Yes, do we have someone else in the queue?
We have 3 more questions in line. Bruce Jaffe, you're next. Please unmute and ask your question.
Thank you very much. I detect a sense of frustration, Shelley and Mark, in this session. So could you talk about what your influence has been in this session in terms of getting your legislation through or your concepts heard as a member of what I'll describe as a super minority?
Thank you, Bruce. Representative Pierce, if you would answer that first.
Yeah, well, the cold hard reality is that on the big issues, the big ideological issues, the philosophical issues, is you're not going to get anywhere. So, whether it's tax policy, tax fairness, there are a lot of issues that, for the Republicans, it's kind of their ideological orthodoxy, and you're just never going to get any ground on that. But there are all kinds of other issues and things where you can make a real difference in the background where it's not even seen. So I'll just give you one example in my case this session. So for a long time, people incarcerated, inmates, have had to pay really high telephone rates. And this makes it difficult for them to stay engaged with their family and their kids when they're incarcerated. Well, finally, the FCC on the federal level put in, basically regulated the rates because there's only one provider. It's a monopoly. You can't choose which telephone carrier you want to use when you're incarcerated. And so last year, the FCC said we cannot regulate the intrastate rates, only interstate rates. So legislators, somebody please act on that. So I introduced a bill, and it went to the Utilities Committee, and I couldn't get it heard. The person just wasn't interested. So this year, what I did is I took that bill and I just drafted it in the form of an amendment. And I was able to convince the chair of the Courts and Criminal Code Committee and the author of a bill that dealt with facilities, corrections facilities. So let me put that in that bill. And that provision now has been moving along very nicely with no controversy. I think it just came out of committee in the Senate. So I'm crossing my fingers that nothing will happen to it when it gets to the floor. And that's just one example of how you can do things. And then also, we just mentioned that example where the utilities wanted to get that provision in the bill to give them the monopoly basically on these EV charging things. And when I spoke out about that in committee, the chair decided that he didn't want to have to defend monopoly over entrepreneurship. And so it didn't go in there. They had to wait for the Senate. So you can have some impact.
Thank you very much, Representative Pierce. Senator Yoder.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm trying to be positive and not let the discouragement come out in this meeting today, but I would say that being my second session, I've tried to find some different ways of building some trust and building my relationships with my colleagues in the Senate. And I'm going back to, how to win friends and influence people kind of thing. But I've made it a real priority for me, because I drive back and forth every day to get there as early as I can for my committee meetings. And it has allowed me to have some really good conversations with really the chairs and build some relationship there. And
Anytime you guys want. Is Lisa up?
Russ, you need to mute. Yeah, thank you.
One
Sorry.
of the small little achievements, I've been working on mental health and substance use disorder, and I wanted just to change the language. We have a statewide commission that's called the Commission to Combat Drug Abuse. And it's such a small thing, but but it came from the recovery community in Bloomington. Why are we still calling that commission something so antiquated? So I've been trying to get that language changed, and I actually filed one of my bills was to change it, and I could not get that thing a hearing. I mean, it's so simple and small. But last week I was able to have a pretty good conversation with the chair of that committee, and I really appreciate it. He reached out to me over the week, just this week, and found a bill that we're going to stick that language in. So, to Representative Pierce's point, trust, relationship building is important, because there are these little wins that you can have along the way.
Thanks for putting the work in. Do we have another question,
Yeah, thank you. We have 3 questions in the queue. Dave Askins, you're next. Please unmute and ask your question.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank you, Dave. Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. Thanks to the League and to Senator Yoder and Representative Pierce for being here on a Saturday morning. I have yet another question about HB 1134. First of all, just a nuts and bolts question. When is the last minute by which the chair of the committee could schedule a hearing? In other words, what's the day and time at which we can say, okay, this is definitely not going to be heard if it hasn't been scheduled? And then the second question, Bloomington is home to the flagship state university of the state of Indiana. And you might think that Indiana University's leadership might have a view on this legislation. So I'm wondering if you've heard anything from the leadership of Indiana University. And if not, is that something that the sponsors could possibly use in defense of this bill? If they say, look, we haven't heard an objection from Indiana University, so for heaven's sakes, it must be okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dave. Senator Yoder, would you respond first?
I would say to the logistics, I'm actually not sure what the statute says as far as last minute changes. I think it's a prerogative of the chair, and I have seen last minute changes of taking things off and putting things on, up until the day of. So education, 1134 will be heard in education, and we meet on Wednesday afternoons at 1:30. So as of right now, it has not been put on the agenda. But as soon as it is, I've got people that I've promised that I'll let them know, give them a heads up. But it can be the day of where things happen. And to the second point about Indiana University, I think I've heard from Indiana University more this year than I did last year, which I have a good relationship with their government affairs people and appreciate the work that they're doing. I don't know. They haven't been, maybe ask them, maybe start applying some pressure, maybe ask the questions to them, because then they can be ready to say something when it does get a hearing, or maybe they can work behind the scenes. But I haven't heard specifically about 1134. So I think that's a good idea to ask them. I think what came out about on the House side, the speaker, his influence with the college board and his employment there, and how that has come to light again and has really impacted another layer of, but I think the more light we can shine on it, the better.
Thank you, Senator Yoder. Representative Pierce.
Now, IU never criticizes the legislature and they stay away from controversial issues, and that might be smart. You never know, because they're always worried about getting punished when it comes time for their appropriations in the next budget cycle. So very rarely, even when their own interests are at risk, do they publicly criticize the legislature in a committee hearing. They tend to meet with people behind the scenes and make their case and get things taken care of. Occasionally, rarely, they'll come out publicly and criticize them. It's just, their strategy is just, not to offend the legislature because they need their money every 2 years. And so that's just reality on that. As far as the deadline, I think the Senate deadlines are pretty similar, and these are a little bit fungible, but theoretically on February 22nd, which is a Tuesday, is the last day to get a committee report adopted. So I think that probably within a day or two, the Senate would have the same deadline if it's not the same. So I think you're basically looking around, toward the end of February. But the other thing to keep in mind is even if the Senate kills the bill, House Bill 1134, it can still come back in a conference committee. So, if the House is really hell-bent on getting that provision into law, they can do some hard bargaining with the Senate and hold some of their stuff hostage in exchange for getting House Bill 1134 just put into a conference committee someplace. The Senate would come back to the House and Senate for a simple up and down vote. There'd be no opportunity to amend it. There'll be no committee hearing, nothing. It will just, you'll have a conference committee meeting, which can be very short, and they're not required to take testimony in there. And they don't even have to say they're going to put the provision in the conference committee meeting. They can just meet, talk about the bill, then adjourn, then they behind the scenes they decide what to do, and then it shows up on the House floor. So you are never safe until the legislature adjourns for the year.
Thank you, Representative Pierce. Okay. The next question, please.
Next question is Pamela Davidson. Pamela, please unmute yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you, League, and thank you, Shelley and Matt. Thank you for being tortured every day for Monroe County. We appreciate it. I have a question about voting rights. I'm very concerned Indiana just passed that new ridiculous law that says your affidavit now has to say if you can't vote on election day or any day of early voting, the only way you can get an absentee. This is happening all over the country with our gerrymandering, with this kind of legislation. I fear they're going to put more power into the Secretary of State. And by the way, Connie Lawson, a number of years ago, purged, was it 400,000 voters from our rolls, and it was found to be illegal court-wise. Did she ever put those people back? So my question is, how can we protect voting rights in Indiana? Because the Supreme Court's not going to do it, and they are at risk all over.
Thank you, Pamela. Okay, Matt, would you like to take this one first, please?
Yeah, that provision in House Bill 1116, which would, it's not law yet, but it's in a House bill now pending in the Senate. And it would essentially say that, currently now you have to have an excuse to vote absentee by mail unless you're over 65 or older. And so currently you just, if you attest to the fact that you expect to be out of the county all day on election day, you can go ahead and vote absentee by mail. This would say that not only would you have to attest that you'll be out of town on the election day itself, but on any of the other early voting days that are available. And the chair of the House Elections Committee clearly thinks that voting by mail is bad. He thinks it's, just riven with fraud and is problematic. He wants everybody voting in person, basically. And so that's what he's attempting to do here. Now, I haven't heard from the Senate. I think, Senator Ford from Terre Haute, not J.D. Ford from Indianapolis, but Senator Ford over from Terre Haute is the chair of the Elections Committee, and I don't know if he'll pick up that provision or not. And so we'll have to wait and see what the Senate's going to do on that particular provision. It's interesting because that provision about the absentee by mail voting went into an amendment in committee, And then the bill got referred to Ways and Means. Both of these election bills went to Ways and Means under the theory they had some fiscal impact. And then Ways and Means took two bills and shoved them together, basically put them into one, merged them, and kept in this kind of suppression provision. So I'm hoping that perhaps the Senate will think better of it and not put it in place. So that's another bill where the public needs to be keeping an eye out and show up on committee day if that bill gets hearing and ask for that provision to be taken out.
Thank you, Matt. Senator Yoder.
Thanks, Pam. It's good to see you. I would anticipate that the bill, I can't see why 1116 wouldn't get a hearing, but I do feel that the chair of elections, Senator John Ford from Terre Haute, tends to be a little bit more moderate when it comes to these things. So, we'll have to see. But how do we begin to sort of change the tide for Indiana? I'd say continue to work. I think we made some progress. We didn't get what we wanted with the Independent Redistricting Commission, but we have to continue pushing. We can't stop. I mean, it sort of is connected to Amy Oliver's question. I feel like it doesn't matter. It does matter. Maybe you don't feel like you're getting the responses that you want because they want you to be quiet, and we can't be quiet. So continue to do that good work that you're doing on voting rights, and don't give up.
Thank you. Thank you, Shelley. Our next question.
Christine Hitchcock, please unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thank you, Senator Yoder and Representative Pierce. I think it's a testament to the power of gerrymandering that you're the only two that are here today. I have a question about HB 1072, which would require public school districts that get a referendum passed to share part of that with charter schools. The bill doesn't seem to require the charters to be involved in the effort to get the referendum passed in any way, or to explain how or why the funds would be used, why they need the funds, or how they would use them. Along with efforts to expand education saving accounts to give parents money for remediation, there seems to be little effort by the authors of these bills to require oversight of how the tax money is spent. What can be done to require oversight of how tax money is being used in these ways?
Thank you, Christine. Senator Yoder, would you like to answer first, please?
Oh, yes. So this is such a terrible bill. And I'm so glad we have all of the activism around 1134 and hearing from folks. But then you can have a 1072, be just as damaging as sort of to the actual success of public education that doesn't get a lot of attention. But I know we're really working hard to kill that bill as well. But you're right. I mean, if I hear it once, I hear it 100 times, almost daily. We don't have enough oversight, and we've got all of this, we need to have better accountability of how we spend taxpayers' money, except when it comes to education. I mean, we are setting up these educational savings accounts and then all of a sudden realize, wow, maybe we should figure out who's best to give that some oversight. And maybe it's the treasurer of Indiana. Without any accountability of whether or not it's successful, it's actually achieving what parents needed to achieve. I mean, it is going to probably be expanded, I anticipate. I mean, it's being expanded this year already, even though they're saying that it's not an expansion, but technically it is being expanded. So we're keeping an eye on 1072. We're ready for it and want to make sure that perhaps if it does get through, maybe some amendments is to provide guardrails for getting some accountability for charter schools or where our voucher money is being sent, that we can get some accountability with those dollars.
Thank you, Senator Yoder. Representative Pierce.
Believe me, the House Democrats have pounded away on this issue for years now, virtual charter schools. They just want to, and this is one of the things so frustrating, is they have a two-track system. They have one set of rules for the for the voucher receiving schools, the charter schools, and they have another set of schools for the rules for the traditional public schools. They don't want the oversight and accountability there, and it's frustrating. And it's almost comical because over the last several years, they've really been tightening down on the traditional public schools and how they can actually go ahead and propose these, how they have to have very specific things that explain to the voters what they're going to use with the money, all these requirements. And, the schools can't use any school resources to actually promote them. I mean, they put in all kinds of things to really tighten down the screws on these referendums for traditional public schools. And now they're essentially saying, oh, and when you do all that work and you get, you convince the taxpayers to pay additional money, now you have to share it with other, charter schools, which, have not done anything to help, pass the referendum necessarily. And then it gets even crazier because you have to remember that charter schools have students who are not in that school district. You can come from anywhere to attend a charter school. So they have to, in the bill, they have to create this kind of strange convoluted system. Like, well, what do you do if someone, from Owen County drives over to attend a charter school in Bloomington? How do you have that money roll around? Because their parents aren't, in the MCCSC school system. They're not paying the property taxes there. And so it's actually going to be paying to support students who don't even live in the taxing district of the school district. So it's just crazy. But the short answer is they don't want accountability. It's not, at least not for their chosen schools.
Thank you, Representative Pierce. The next question, please.
Louise Schlesinger, please unmute and ask your question.
Yes. Last week, I read an article in the Wall Street Journal entitled "High-Priced Hospitals in Indiana Press Their Political Luck." And in the article, according to the article, Indiana hospital prices are either the 5th highest in the country, according to the Rand Corporation, or the 3rd highest in the country, according to Harvard. And the article goes on to say that Representative Todd Houston and Senator Rod Bray have called for Indiana hospitals and insurers to present a plan within 3 months that will reduce hospital prices to the national average within 3 years. And absent a viable plan, they have promised to pursue legislation to reduce prices. So my question is, what do you know about those discussions? And do you think such legislation might attract bipartisan support?
Thank you, Louise. Representative Pierce, would you like to address that question first, please?
Yes, it will have bipartisan support. I have no doubt about that. What essentially Speaker Houston and President Pro Tem Bray have said is, we think there's a problem here. People are paying too much. The hospitals as nonprofits are collecting too many reserves, and so we're going to give you an opportunity to come up with your own solution because, government is never as good in their opinion of solving these problems. And so they've got this window to see what the hospitals come up with. I'm not aware of formal negotiations. Certainly the Democrats aren't being included in discussions. I have no idea if the hospitals are talking directly to Republicans about this or whether they're just off in a corner somewhere coming up with their own plan to do that. But it's just been interesting because Professor Hicks at Ball State, an economist, has really written and done a lot of analysis on this, and he's really blasted away at these hospitals. He and his last thing, I think he said that IU Health, which has about, I think he said had $9 billion in reserves, that IU Health could provide free care to everyone for an entire year and still have more billions of dollars in reserve than the state of Indiana. And that's really saying something. And so, as you know, IU Health already announced they've got some kind of 5-year glide path to, slowly reduce their rates. But I think the real truth is that the government really wants to do something about this. We've got to go back and revisit state antitrust laws. And I think that what we've done is we've allowed too much consolidation in a lot of industries, but particularly in healthcare. We're kind of an IU Health company town now for the most part, and there's no way you can really, as a consumer, exercise any market power to bring those prices down. So I think you will see both parties, if they don't respond in some way that satisfies the legislature, I think both parties will be supporting efforts to get those costs more in line with national averages.
Thank you. Senator Yoder.
How lucky are we to have Representative Pierce? I honestly can't, I was like, I don't know what I can add to that other than, yes, I'm aware. It will get bipartisan support in the Senate. I had a meeting with IU Health last week, and they're actively working on, and I don't know sort of where they are, what those details are, but I do anticipate getting that report. I think it's end of April or thereabouts. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Our next question, please.
Our next question is Russ Skiba has a follow-up question. Russ, please unmute and ask your question.
Thanks again. Boy, I got to tell you, Senator Yoder, how lucky we are to have both of you. I mean, your work is just inspiring how hard you're pushing back, and I know how frustrating it is for you. I actually have two questions. I'll try and stay in the time this time. First of all, a lot of folks have been working off of the advice of some lobbyists saying that what we want to be doing during this phase is to try to convince the Republican leadership not to hear this bill in committee and to email the chair and members directly. My first question is, given where we stand on that bill, do you think that's still a worthwhile strategy? And the second is a follow-up to Dave Askin's question. In fact, there were 200 faculty and staff of Indiana University that sent a letter to administration about this issue. Do you think those folks who haven't heard anything back from that letter should keep pushing that issue and keep pressing the IU administration to take a stand on this? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Russ. Senator Yoder, would you go first, please?
Just for clarification, is this about 1134 specifically?
Yes, this is about specifically about 1134. Thank you.
So yes, I would ask for a follow-up with whoever signed on to that letter. I would follow up. I think it's working. As Senator Pierce, I mean, there is a deadline on when we can actually hear this bill. So even though we may hit the February 22nd deadline, still be alert and be ready to go if it gets added in some kind of a conference committee at the end. But I would say if it gets to the 22nd, I don't know how that language would be added to something, but it can be. So stay alert and keep applying that pressure. But I think your guidance from these lobbyists saying, just keep letting people know how important this is so it doesn't get a hearing. That would be the best solution for 1134 is just that it gets killed.
All right, Representative Pierce, would you like to add to that, please?
Yeah, I think it's always helpful to have people contacting the decision makers, in this case, the chair of the Senate committee. But one thing you have to know is that the most persuasive thing is when people hear from their own constituents. So if I hear from a bunch of people from Martinsville, that's interesting to hear their views. But my job is to represent people in Bloomington, and then you just have the old political self-preservation ideas that people in my district can vote for me. And if they don't like what I'm doing, they can throw me out, whereas people in other districts can't. So the key thing is you have to network and try to get as much grassroots opposition to the bill from the committee chair and the members of the committee, because sometimes if members of the committee get so much negative pushback, they'll go to the chair and say, please don't hear that bill. I don't really want to get hassled with this, and it's not very popular in my district. So I think that that can have some impact if legislators are hearing from people in their own districts. And, I'll just say on IU, I think the legislature just largely thinks that the university is full of a bunch of leftist liberals and they kind of tolerate us, And so I don't know how persuasive we are. What I have seen is when it comes to social issues that are really being driven by the extreme right, the only thing that tends to temper that is when the corporate people speak out. So, for example, we had a voter suppression bill last year. It came over from the Senate and the House, and Cummins and Eli Lilly showed up and they spoke against it. And then you might recall that because Georgia had gotten so much attention, Major League Baseball pulled the All-Star game from Atlanta, and that caught the attention of the hospitality people in Indianapolis. And I think they basically told the legislature, don't put us in a position of losing a lot of these marquee events that occur in Indianapolis over this issue, and they ended up killing it. So I really think that corporate America will have much more influence.
Thank you, Representative Pierce. Our next question.
This is your opportunity, participants, if you want to submit another question. I have one question that was submitted by email that I will read to give people a chance to submit another question. This is from Tim Maloney from the Hoosier Environmental Council. And he asks, is it prudent to adopt the sweeping changes in agency rulemaking procedures as proposed in HB 1100 that may create more uncertainty for the public and less effective government when there's a more sensible option in another bill to study agency rulemaking in a legislative task force? Thank you.
All right, Representative Pierce, would you like to address that question?
This is so there are two bills that would really just be a revolution in administrative law and go against, probably 100 years of administrative law traditions. So the one bill would say that if you appeal an agency rule, you go to court and you say this agency somehow broke the law and passed this, it didn't follow the statute or it didn't have the record. There's this thing called an Administrative Procedures Act they have to follow. At any rate, the judge under the current law has to give deference to the expertise of the agency. So the judge just cannot substitute their own judgment for that of the agency. So we have this bill that's moved through that will basically say judges will now have what's called de novo review, meaning they start over again, and that judges can even accept evidence outside of what is in the record from the proceeding before the agency. So what this really does is it opens it up for the judges to just substitute their own sense for what they think the best policy is. We're going to turn to judiciary and the policymakers, which I told my Republican friends on the House floor, I thought you guys lied awake at night worrying about judicial activism, and now you're serving up power to the judiciary to supplant the expert agencies when it comes to, say, environmental regulations. And so that bill's passed over the Senate. And we have another bill, which is also pretty strange. It essentially says that any agency that wants to pass a rule will now have to repeal one other rule. So I was asking the person on the House floor, the author, which toxic pollutant rule will we repeal to make room to have a regulation that prevent us from having some other, toxic carcinogen in our environment? It's like, what's that trade-off going to be? And he kind of talked around that. And then the other thing it says is that none of these regulations can be any stricter than a federal regulation. And this is a big conservative idea. It's been around forever. We should never do anything in Indiana that's stricter than what the federal government's doing.
Thank you, Representative Pierce. Senator Yoder.
Are you ready to leave in 2 minutes?
Yep.
I appreciate the heads up about these bills because they haven't made their way either in the committees that I'm on. We haven't been debating them on the floor of the Senate yet, but I appreciate the heads up. I wanted to let you know that our last meeting last month gave me some heads up on a couple things, and then I was ready to go. I was very prepared when they did come through the Senate. So I appreciate this conversation so much. What's interesting is I hear such frustration from our public schools on the amount of regulation and unfunded mandates. And 1134 does adds to the burden of teachers. And we have no problem continuing to add. And we never have a discussion about taking away. If we're going to add something, we need to take something else away. But when it comes to our environment, it's a sort of a constant chorus of we have too many regulations. And it is very concerning because it is our environment. And I wish we had such caution with our environment that we have when it comes to educating our children. But that certainly isn't the case. And I do wonder, this does tie, we hear from the business community when it comes to issues of regulation and utilities, the environment. And we're not as prone to hear from them when it comes to issues of public education, when it comes to the education of our children. And I wish that there would be a strong priority there to ensure that the legislature is doing the right thing. And it's a group that has a lot of weight, and we should apply pressure there, just like you are saying you're applying pressure to Indiana University.
Thank you very much, Senator Yoder. Do we have any additional questions in the queue?
Apparently, I missed a question from Jim Allison. Jim, are you there? If
Jim?
not, we'll go ahead to, I understand Tim Maloney had a question. Tim, are you there?
Tim, if you're there and still have a question, if you'd unmute.
Well, while they're figuring that out, we have a question from Pamela Davidson.
Okay, Pamela.
Yes, thanks for taking my second question. I wonder if there's anything happening in the Indiana legislature with criminal justice reform. That's been a hot issue all over the country. Things have not really changed. We learned from our own county study here that we're incarcerating uncharged people in our jail way too long. The judges are granting too many continuances. The prosecutors charging a lot of people, and with pot not being legalized in the near future, though all the surrounding states have done it for economic reasons, how brilliant, we don't have that leverage to release some people out of our jail. So is there anything happening? Because as the wife and daughter of economists, that produces nothing except lifelong trauma at a huge taxpayer cost that never ends. So I hope we're thinking of doing something to reduce numbers and trafficking, both in the jails and in the courts, because no good comes from most of that with nonviolent drug uses.
Thank you very much, Pam. And Senator Yoder, I think you're up first this time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Pam, for that. The Democrats, the Democratic caucus in the Senate, we really leaned into decriminalization of marijuana in this session. And this isn't the first time, but we really made it a priority and was not successful. But we did offer an amendment to our drug schedule. We hear an updated drug schedule every session. And we made an amendment and called for a roll call vote just to see where people were. And it was bipartisan in the support that is there. So there is support. It's, keep up the activism there. But whether or not maybe next session, since it is a budget session, we'll be able to make some strides in that direction. But you are right. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, criminalizing nonviolent marijuana use, or just nonviolent, just marijuana use, and could save taxpayers so much money if we could find a way forward by decriminalizing marijuana. But I also wanted to say HB 1294, which addresses the restraining of pregnant inmates. That has made its way to the Senate. That is a good bill. It's common sense. Most states do not restrain pregnant inmates, especially during labor. But this bill will make some serious positive steps forward.
Thank you. Representative Pierce.
Yeah, I think right now it's a mixed bag on criminal justice reform. I think overall we're kind of lurching our way in the right direction, but what's happening is you can see the politics is beginning to shift a little bit. So particularly in Marion County, all across the country in our urban areas, and now we're even seeing in Bloomington, there's a spike in violence and murders and gun violence. And in Marion County, the Republicans have decided, Marion County Republicans, that they got a mayoral election coming up this year. So it's good politics to be tough on crime. They put together this kind of crime package, and it's really kind of harkens back to more of a zero tolerance day in the mid 1990s. They just want to go back to kind of lock everybody up, don't let anybody out. And luckily, I think that most of that agenda will go by the wayside in the House. One area that I do think is kind of most relevant to this is, as you know, there have been nonprofit corporations formed to raise money to help people, accused only, people bail out of jail while awaiting trial because they cannot make bond. This has really infuriated the bail bonds industry. So they have created some front groups and really gone to work to try to attack these organizations. And unfortunately, we've had some tragic situations where people awaiting trial were able to make bond because of the help of the nonprofit, and they ended up committing some violent crimes. And so now the answer is we have to crack down on the nonprofits who help indigent people afford bail to get out. And so they would cap it at $2,000 as a max they could do, and only for misdemeanors. When we know that people always get charged with felonies, you get overcharged on the front end. That's the way the system works. So that bill has passed the House, it's pending, and I think the Senate passed a similar one. So I think you're going to see restrictions on the nonprofits and no restrictions on the bail bonds people. When they pay for people to get out and they commit crimes, we don't ever complain about that. So that's going to be a big step backwards, I think.
Hey, thank you both very much. At this point in time, I think that we have answered all of the questions that have been in the queue. And I would like to give both Senator Yoder and Representative Pierce an opportunity to kind of summarize things. And then we will end by closing out with our reminder of some other things for our next session. So Representative Pierce, I think you get to go first this time. Any summary?
Okay, well, maybe just, kind of look forward in general. We've talked a lot about a lot of the bills pending. And so, for the House, Tuesday, the 22nd of this month is the deadline for bills to get out of committee. And so by then we'll have an idea of what part of the Senate agenda the House is going to go ahead and move and go along with. And then, by the next week, we'll have had everything theoretically out of the House and the Senate, and then we'll be into this conference committee time. We have to adjourn no later than March 14th. I'm pretty sure the leadership of the House and the Senate want to get out at least a week earlier than that. And so I think they'll be pressuring people to expedite their conference committees. So that's the point where if the House and the Senate bills have been passed by the other House with changes, the originating House has to decide whether to concur and basically vote to agree with the changes, or whether they want to object and go to a conference committee. And then you've got to try to negotiate some kind of compromise. And that's where you can have stuff pop up that you've never seen before, or things that you thought were dead come back to life. And so that first week or so of March will be a really critical time where you have to keep an eye out for what's happening in the back rooms all over the State House. But I wouldn't be surprised if we're done a week earlier than the law says that we have to be done.
Thank you very much. And Senator Yoder, do you have any closing remarks?
I do. A couple of notes. I wanted to give a heads up for this coming week. On February 15th, which will be Tuesday, if you want to tune in or come and visit the State House, that is our Indiana Black Legislative Caucus. They wear African garments, and they'll be making lots of points of privilege. I'm good friends with the mayor of Charlestown, Indiana, Mayor Treva Hodges, and I'm doing a resolution. It's a simple resolution, remembering and honoring the lives of was a Charlestown lynching back in the late 1800s of 3 innocent Black males. And so that's happening on February 15th. And that's, I think, in honor of Black History Month, And in light of what we're having discussions about with 1134, that will be it's a really important day, even though it's not about legislation, but still important. And the other one is a celebration. On February the 17th, on this coming Thursday, there will be a special resolution honoring the 100th anniversary of the Jacobs School of Music. We have musicians that are coming into the Senate to play, and I'll be honoring the Jacobs School for their 100 years of influence globally with their music and all that they've done to making the world a much better place with the arts. So those two things are on the agenda for this coming week, and those are positives.
Thank you both so much for participating today. We just really appreciate, we know it takes a lot of time during a very busy point in time in all of the work that you do for us. So thank you so much for being here today to answer all of these questions. And now I'm wondering if I can see the last slide that we have to share, because I just want to remind everyone that our next legislative update will be Saturday, March 26th. Make sure to register for that. It will again be from 9:30 until 11 a.m. And keep following the work of the legislative, the General Assembly at the website, the IGA website. And there will be follow-up emails coming out with reference to any additional information that might be helpful to you. I want to thank you to our team members, Ralph Shaw, Voter Service Committee, and from the Bloomington Monroe County League, Sherry Frank, who served as the question moderator from the Brown County League, and Community Access Television, our legislator, and our wonderful participants who came with such great questions. Please make sure to come back for the final session so that we can get an update on everything that happened and keep your activism going. I want to add a thank you to our sponsors, the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce and the Brown County Chamber of Commerce, for joining us and being able to present this legislative update. Stay aware, stay active, don't give up hope, and thank you all for participating.